By the time Hannah Wren stepped down from the stagecoach in Copper Falls, her dress was gray with trail dust. Her lips were cracked from thirst, and her fingers ached around the handle of her carpetbag. She had crossed 1,000 miles from Pennsylvania carrying Harold Sutter's letters, reading them whenever the road grew long and lonely. Every page had promised the same thing: a home, a husband, a future. That was why she had come to Copper Falls, looking for Harold Sutter.
Hannah Wren believed she was walking toward the man who had promised her a future. Truth was, she was walking toward the first wound Copper Falls would give her. I'm Abel Beecham, though most folks around these parts simply call me Mr. B. Out here, promises could travel farther than truth. A man could fill a page with tender words, then stand in daylight and pretend those words had never meant a thing. And on that dusty afternoon, Harold Sutter was waiting to prove just how little a promise could weigh.
Harold stood outside his feed store in a clean vest, watching the stagecoach roll away like he had been waiting for a joke to arrive. Hannah crossed the dusty street toward him, one hand gripping her worn carpetbag while the other held Harold Sutter's letters securely against her chest, protecting the promises that had carried her 1,000 miles west. Harold looked her up and down before his smile settled into place. "Hannah Wren?" he asked. She nodded, tired but still hopeful. "Mr. Sutter, I came as you asked." His smile faltered. Then it sharpened. "Now, I never said you should actually come." The words struck harder than the heat. Hannah stared at him, unable to answer. Harold glanced toward the boardwalk, where two women had stopped near the mercantile window, and a man by the hitching post had turned to listen. "I'm engaged now," Harold said, raising his voice just enough for them to hear. "To Miss Clara Cook. I figured you would find better prospects before wasting the fare." Hannah's face burned. Her carpetbag suddenly felt heavier than the whole journey. She had imagined a home, a table, a place to wash the dust from her hands, maybe even kindness. Instead, before she had water, rest, or one safe place to set down her bag, Harold Sutter handed her shame in the middle of the street, and Copper Falls watched her carry it. Hannah left Harold outside the feed store with her carpetbag in one hand and her pride held together by nothing but stubborn breath. The boarding house was the first place she tried. The woman behind the desk looked Hannah over, then looked at the empty coin purse in her hand. "No money, no room," she said. Hannah stepped back into the street with her face burning hotter than before. Next, she walked to the little white church at the edge of town. But the door was locked, and no one answered when she knocked. By sundown, she tried the mercantile, asking if there was work to be had. Sweeping, mending, counting stock. Anything honest. The shopkeeper glanced past her toward Harold's feed store, then shook his head. "Best not bring trouble under my roof." That was when Hannah understood. Harold's story had already reached every corner of Copper Falls. By nightfall, all the town knew her name. Not as Hannah Wren, not as a woman who had crossed 1,000 miles with hope folded against her heart, but as the mail-order bride Harold Sutter had refused. Inside the saloon, Harold raised his glass and laughed loud enough for the street to hear. "Gentlemen, there goes the only bride in Arizona foolish enough to come when no man sent for her." The room roared. Hannah stopped outside the saloon window, half hidden in the dark, gripping her carpetbag until her knuckles ached. She did not see the tall, silent rancher standing near the saloon door with one hand resting on his saddle horn. But Nathaniel Shaw heard every cruel word before he ever saw her face. Hannah had nowhere to go when the lamps went out in Copper Falls. Every door she had tried was closed to her now, and every shadow on the street seemed to carry Harold's laughter. She was still standing near the saloon porch with her carpetbag at her feet when Finnegan, the old barkeep with silver whiskers and tired eyes, stepped outside and looked her over. "You can't sleep in the road, miss," he said. Hannah lifted her chin. "I'm not asking charity." "Didn't say you were." He opened the back door and led her through the kitchen to a small storeroom that smelled of flour sacks, dried apples, and swept pine dust. "You can sleep here tonight," Finnegan said. "Sweep the floor come morning, and we'll call it even." For the first time since she stepped off the stagecoach, Hannah felt someone offer her dignity instead of pity. She slept on a folded sack beside her carpet bag, one arm wrapped around it. At dawn, she swept every board clean. Finnegan watched from the doorway while she worked, then spoke in a low voice. "Harold Sutter has been spreading your story for sport, but there's one man near town who does not laugh much anymore. Nathaniel Shaw, widower, 2 children. Stone Creek Ranch is falling behind." Hannah stilled with the broom in her hands. "Does he want a wife?" Finnegan's eyes softened. "He needs one, not for romance, for survival." Hannah looked toward the brightening street. After yesterday, survival sounded like the first honest thing Copper Falls had offered her. Hannah found Nathaniel Shaw at the blacksmith's yard, tightening a loose strap on a tired bay horse. A folded tax notice stuck from his coat pocket, and a feed bill lay on the wagon seat beside him, marked with numbers Hannah could not yet read from where she stood. Nathaniel looked older than Harold, and harder too, with grief carved deep beside his mouth. But when he turned toward her, he did not smirk. He did not look her over like spoiled goods. He only waited. "My name is Hannah Wren," she said. "I'm told you need a wife." Nathaniel's hands went still on the strap. "That is a dangerous thing to say in this town." "I have already been made into a joke," Hannah answered. "I would rather be useful than pitied." Something in his face changed. "What can you do?" "I can cook, clean, keep accounts, mend clothes, preserve food, manage a household, and care for children. I do not faint at hard work, Mr. Shaw." Nathaniel glanced toward the hills beyond town. "Stone Creek is worn thin. Feed costs more every month. The tax office says I owe money I cannot make sense of. My daughter barely speaks. My son is angry enough to hate anybody who walks through the door. My wife died last winter, and there is no softness waiting at my ranch." Hannah held his gaze. "Are you offering honesty or trying to frighten me away?" "Both." For the first time since she arrived, Hannah almost smiled. Nathaniel removed his hat. "If we do this, it will be legal, plain, practical. I will not lie to you about love." Hannah thought of Harold's letters, each one sweeter than the last, and how easily he had denied them in the street. "Then I accept," she said. "Honest work is better than another pretty lie." They were married that same afternoon in the minister's small office behind the church, beneath a wooden cross and a window filmed with dust. There were no flowers, no music, no smiling family gathered close. The minister read the words in a tired, careful voice. Nathaniel answered low. Hannah answered clearly, though her hands were cold around the folds of her skirt. When it was done, Nathaniel did not kiss her. He only looked at her with quiet respect and said, "Mrs. Shaw." Those 2 words steadied something inside her. Outside, Harold Sutter leaned against a porch post with 2 men beside him, waiting like buzzards. Hannah's carpet bag sat in the dust near the church steps, exactly where she had set it down before the vows. "Well, Shaw," Harold called, grinning. "Looks like you finally took what another man refused." The watching townspeople fell silent. Hannah's face tightened, but Nathaniel did not reach for his fists. He did not give Harold the pleasure of anger. Instead, he stepped down, picked up Hannah's carpet bag, and brushed the dust from one side with his sleeve. Then he held it carefully, as if her few belongings mattered because she mattered. He turned to her. "Come on home." No one cheered. No one apologized. But as Nathaniel Shaw walked beside her through Copper Falls, carrying her bag where everyone could see, Hannah no longer felt quite so alone. For the first time since arriving, someone had chosen to stand with her in public. Stone Creek Ranch sat in a shallow valley where the wind dragged dust across the yard, and the porch sagged like it was too tired to hold up hope. Nathaniel stopped the wagon near the front steps. Hannah climbed down carefully, holding her carpet bag, and saw a home that had once been loved. Dead flowers leaned in the garden beds. Laundry hung stiff on the line. A broken rocking chair rested beside the door, untouched and weathered gray. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cold ashes, old bread, and grief that had stayed too long. A little girl stood near the table, thin as a candle, with dark eyes too, watchful for her age. That's Grace, Nathaniel said softly. Grace did not speak. But after a long moment, she stepped back from the doorway to let Hannah enter the room. Then a boy of 12 appeared in the hall, one hand gripping the doorframe. Benjamin Shaw stared at Hannah as if she had stolen something from him. You can't sleep in her room, he snapped. You can't use her things. You can't be our mother. The words cut deep, but Hannah did not flinch. I know, she said gently, and I will not try. Benjamin's anger faltered, confused by her calm. Hannah set her carpetbag beside the kitchen wall and looked at Nathaniel. Where are Rebecca's things kept? She asked, speaking the name of his late wife carefully. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. I won't disturb them, Hannah said, not without permission. For the first time, Benjamin had no sharp answer. And Grace, still silent by the table, looked at Hannah like she had heard something kind. Hannah did not try to earn her place at Stone Creek Ranch with speeches. She began with water, soap, flour, thread, and steady hands. The next morning, she swept dust from the kitchen corners and boiled dirty linens until the gray water turned dark. By noon, bread was rising near the stove, beans were simmering, and the windows stood open to let fresh air move through the house. She repaired the loose wire on the henhouse, sorted spoiled preserves from the good jars, and wrote a clean list of flour, beans, candles, feed, and medicine the ranch still had. Grace followed her quietly, never speaking, but always near. When Hannah reached for clothespins, Grace handed them over. When Hannah folded towels, Grace folded the small ones. And when Hannah found Rebecca's sewing basket beneath a parlor chair, she did not claim it. She carried the basket to the parlor table, brushed dust from the lid, and said, This belongs where everyone can remember her. Benjamin heard her from the hall doorway. He said nothing, but his hard stare softened just enough to hurt him. Later, while putting papers in order, Hannah found a stack of feed receipts and tax notices tied with string beside Nathaniel's account book. She did not understand the trouble yet, but she saw the same feed store name written again and again, Harold Sutter. That evening, Nathaniel came in from the barn and stopped at the sight of warm food, clean plates, and lamplight shining on the table. For a moment, Stone Creek Ranch did not look healed, but it looked alive. And Hannah, standing quietly by the stove, felt Grace's small hand slip into hers. 3 days later, Hannah untied the stack of feed receipts, tax notices, and land papers she had found beside Nathaniel's account book. At first, she thought grief had simply made the numbers untidy. Then she saw two troubles hiding in the papers. Harold Sutter's feed store had charged Nathaniel twice for the same grain. That was theft. But the tax notice frightened her more. The county clerk had listed Stone Creek's acreage under the wrong parcel number. The penalty notice claimed Nathaniel owed money he did not owe. And if no one corrected it, that mistake could become a seizure notice against the ranch. By noon, Hannah had copied the correct figures onto a clean sheet and tied the tax notice, Nathaniel's deed, the land papers, and the account book, together with string. Nathaniel was mending a corral fence when she found him. These numbers are wrong, she said. I need to take them to the county office where the tax rolls are kept before that penalty turns into a seizure notice. Nathaniel looked at the papers in her hands, then at her face. Then I'm going with you. Hannah carried the string-tied papers into town, and Nathaniel walked beside her. At the county office, where the tax rolls were kept behind the counter, Harold was already waiting, smiling like he had expected them. Well now, he said loudly, turning toward the men gathered near the door. The rejected bride thinks she can read a man's papers. Laughter moved through the room. Hannah's cheeks burned, but this time she did not lower her eyes. She set the tax notice, Nathaniel's deed, and the land papers on the counter. This acreage was copied from the wrong parcel number, she said. Stone Creek is listed here under land it does not own. The clerk's smile faded. Hannah turned the deed so he could see the mark beside Nathaniel's name. And this is the correct parcel. The penalty was figured against the wrong land. The room went quiet. Harold stepped closer. Careful, Mrs. Shaw. Nathaniel moved between Harold and Hannah without raising a fist. No, he said. You be careful. Then he stood beside Hannah, facing the room. "She is my wife," he said, "and my partner." The same town that had laughed at her now watched Hannah hold the proof in her steady hands. That night, the porch at Stone Creek Ranch was washed in silver moonlight. The children were asleep. The dishes were dried. And for the first time since Hannah had arrived, Nathaniel sat beside her without speaking of chores, accounts, weather, or debt. After a long silence, he looked toward the broken rocking chair near the porch rail. Rebecca used to sit right there. Hannah kept her hands folded in her lap. "I can go inside." "No," Nathaniel said softly. "I want to remember her without making this house a grave." So he told Hannah about Rebecca. Not like a saint carved in stone, but like a real woman who laughed too loudly, burned biscuits when she was angry, sang while mending shirts, and loved her children with every breath she had. "When the fever took her," Nathaniel whispered, "I stopped loving anything fully. The ranch, the house, even Benjamin and Grace. I fed them, I clothed them, but loving them felt like giving death another weapon." Hannah's throat tightened. "I know what it is to be useful and still feel unwanted," she said. "Every man in Copper Falls saw me as a burden until I offered labor." Nathaniel turned toward her. "Your worth did not begin when you fixed my books," he said. "And it did not begin when I signed that marriage paper." Hannah looked away, but her eyes filled. For the first time in a long while, she let herself believe she might be more than what she could do for others. She might be someone worth staying for. 3 mornings later, a rider came through the valley with bad news. Fever had reached the East Farms. By noon, Hannah had boiled every kettle in the house. She scrubbed door handles with vinegar, stacked clean linens near the stove, and warned Benjamin and Grace not to drink from the creek. Nathaniel watched her work with a face gone pale. "It was fever last time," he said. Hannah knew what he meant. Rebecca. That evening, Grace left half her supper untouched. By midnight, the little girl was burning hot beneath Hannah's hand. Nathaniel froze beside the bed, his eyes fixed on Grace as if he were watching the past crawl back into the room. Hannah touched his arm firmly. "Bring water," she said. "Tear clean cloth for cooling rags. Stay where Grace can hear your voice." Her calm command pulled him back. Benjamin stood in the doorway, white with fear, gripping the frame with both hands. "Is she going to die?" "Not while this house still has breath," Hannah said. Nathaniel reached for his hat, but his hand shook so badly he could not close it around the brim. Grace coughed hard, and Hannah saw the truth at once. If Nathaniel left that room, fear would follow him all the way to town. But if he stayed, she could keep his hands busy and his voice near Grace. So Hannah turned to Benjamin. She took coins from the kitchen jar, folded a note with the doctor's name, and pressed both into Benjamin's palm. "Copper Falls is less than an hour by hard riding," she told him. "You know the road, and the moon is up." Benjamin swallowed hard. Hannah closed his fingers around the coins and the note. "Ride to town. Bring quinine from Sutter's store. Bring the doctor. And if Harold Sutter stands in your way, you tell him your sister's life is worth more than his pride." Benjamin looked at Grace once. Then he ran for the horse. Grace's fever climbed so high that Hannah could feel the heat rising from the child's skin. She tossed beneath a thin sheet, coughing until her small body shook, calling for her mother in a voice that broke Nathaniel where he stood. Hannah did not let him fall apart. "Hold the lamp," she said. "When I ask for water, you bring it. When I ask for cloth, you hand it to me. And keep talking to Grace so she knows her father is here." Nathaniel obeyed because Hannah's calm gave him something stronger than fear. All night, Hannah cooled Grace's skin with damp cloths, lifted drops of water to her lips, and counted every breath between coughing fits. When Grace began to shake, Hannah steadied her small body with one arm and laid a cool, damp cloth across her forehead. "Stay with us, sweetheart," she whispered. "You are not alone." Far away, in Copper Falls, Benjamin had stood in Sutter's store with every man staring at him. Harold had folded his arms behind the counter and said, "Shaw debts do not get store credit." Benjamin's hand shook, but he did not back down. "My sister is dying," he said. "If you keep that quinine from me, her blood will be on your name." Benjamin slapped Hannah's coins onto the counter. Harold glanced at them, then pushed them back across the worn wood. "Not enough," Harold said, pushing the coins back. "Shaw debts don't buy medicine here." Finnegan stepped in from the street, added a few coins beside Hannah's and said, "Now it is enough. Give the boy the medicine." Near dawn, hoofbeats thundered into the yard at Stone Creek. Benjamin burst through the bedroom door with mud on his boots, quinine in his fist, and the doctor close behind him. "I got it," Benjamin gasped. "Harold tried to stop me, but I got it." For the first time, Nathaniel looked at his son not as a grieving boy, but as someone brave. The doctor stepped toward the bed, but Hannah did not move aside until Grace had swallowed the dose. Then the room went quiet. A rooster called once outside. Grace's burning hand loosened in Hannah's. Her breathing eased. The fever broke with the dawn. Benjamin sank beside the bed, tears streaking clean lines through the dust on his face. Grace opened her eyes just enough to see Hannah. "Don't go," she whispered. Hannah's own tears finally fell. "I won't." Benjamin looked at Hannah, worn thin and trembling, still holding Grace safe. "Miss Hannah," he whispered with no anger left in him. And in those two words, the house changed. By midday, all of Copper Falls had heard that Grace Shaw was alive. They heard Benjamin had ridden into town covered in mud, begging for quinine while Harold Sutter tried to stop him over old debts. They heard Hannah had emptied the kitchen jar to send Benjamin after medicine, and that Finnegan had stepped in with the remaining coins when Harold tried to turn the boy away. They heard the doctor had found Hannah Shaw still at Grace's bedside, hands raw, eyes red, refusing to leave until the child's breathing steadied. And 2 days later, when Grace was strong enough to sleep without fever, Hannah returned to Harold Sutter's feed store in Nathaniel's wagon. Nathaniel drove beside her, while Hannah held Nathaniel's account book and a string-tied bundle of feed receipts in her lap. Harold's cheating had not yet been answered for, so Hannah returned to the very place where he had first shamed her, and this time Copper Falls followed to hear what she had to say. This time, no one laughed when she stepped inside. Finnegan stood near the door. Nathaniel stood beside Hannah. Benjamin stayed close to her. The same boy Harold had tried to turn away when Grace was fighting for breath. Grace was not there. She was home in bed, resting safely under a neighbor woman's care, because Hannah would not leave the child alone. Hannah laid out every feed receipt, every double charge, and every repeated delivery number on Harold's own counter. Stone Creek Ranch was not careless, she said. It was being robbed. Harold's grin died piece by piece. Finnegan stepped forward, his voice rough with anger. "And when the man's daughter needed medicine," he said, "you tried to deny the boy quinine over those same debts." The room went still. Nathaniel stepped closer to Hannah, his voice steady enough for the whole room. "This woman saved my daughter, my ranch, and the part of my heart I thought was buried with Rebecca." No one answered. With Finnegan, Nathaniel, Benjamin, and half the town watching, Harold was cornered by his own receipts and by the boy he had tried to turn away. He had no choice but to sign a repayment note for what he had taken. Copper Falls, the town that had laughed at Hannah Wren, finally lowered its eyes in shame. But Hannah's worth had not begun when they saw it. She had been worthy the day she arrived dusty, broke, thirsty, and alone. Months later, Stone Creek Ranch was not perfect, but it was alive. Fresh flowers bloomed where dead stems had once leaned forgotten. Clean laundry swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The old rocking chair beside the porch no longer sat broken and abandoned to weather and silence. Fresh curtains moved in the kitchen window. Bread cooled on the table, and in the parlor, Rebecca's portrait still had fresh flowers beside it. One evening, Nathaniel placed a simple ring in Hannah's palm. "Not payment," he said softly. "A promise. I chose you once for survival. I choose you now for love." Then he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her gently, not like a man claiming what was owed, like a man honoring what had been freely given. Grace came in from the garden with a handful of wildflowers and smiled as Hannah placed them in a small vase on the kitchen table. Benjamin lingered nearby before looking up shyly. "Will you teach me the ledgers?" Hannah smiled through tears. "I'd be proud to." Stone Creek still carried sorrow, But sorrow no longer ruled it, because the woman nobody wanted had stayed. And by staying, she became the steady heart of the home they all thought was lost.
Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. It really helps us. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Before you go, rate this story 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I'll see you in the next tale.